Science!
And 1, 2.
Woo! Dance! How?
My name is Matt Wittal. I work on the Deep Space Gateway. I'm a guidance, navigation, and control expert, and I also do mission design. So what that means is people usually want to deliver something to the moon or to Mars or some other location throughout space, and I'm one of the first person they talk to. So they'll ask, this is our thing, how do we get it there and can you do it? And so I'll give it first pass, this is how much thrust it's gonna take, this is how much cargo we can deliver, and this is the best way that I think we can do it. But generally, the thing that I spend my most time on is something that looks like this. Actually, this is the government reference model of the logistics module. Right now, we have one contractor and we're onboarding a second one. The one contractor is SpaceX, providing the Dragon XL cargo vehicle. And you can see the full gateway right here behind you. This is one of the older illustrations, the Gateway Power and Propulsion Habitat Airlock Logistics. Big name, but right now we just call it Gateway. This is what it was before the Artemis program really kicked off. And now, of course, here we are with the Artemis program. So what is Gateway and why are we building Gateway? So when we first kicked off the Artemis program, there's a lot of questions like, why are we going to the moon? Why are we building Gateway? And the short answer is that it's a lot safer to test things when you're only 3 days away rather than 2 years. Because with Mars transfer, you have to go out to Mars, you have to wait for the alignment of the planets and come back again. That entire process is a little over 2 years. What we're doing now is testing a whole bunch of technologies on the lunar surface. And in order to have a high turnaround time on those technologies and be able to test as much as we can, we have to have a sustainable and reusable architecture. And that's what the Gateway is. So we can reuse the Gateway over and over again, eventually reuse our human landing system, reuse all of that system so that we can waste as little as possible and do it affordably and for a sustainable approach. Ultimately, our goal is to have a habitat on this south pole of the moon, and we're doing that with the help of a lot of international commercial partners. So this is pretty informal. I mean, I usually have slides. I don't have slides, so let's...
So, if I'm not mistaken, Gateway is essentially the equivalent of what ISS is around Earth. Gateway will be orbiting around the moon, kind of the docking station, and then that's what they'll go down to the moon from there, correct?
Something like that. It could be analogous to the ISS. However, the Gateway is a lot smaller than the ISS. The ISS on the inside is about the room of a 6-bedroom house. We'll have about a 1-bedroom plus maybe a single car garage or so. It's not really that big on the inside, especially not in phase 1, which is just going to include the halo and PPE element, which kind of looks like this. This is going to be Starship instead, sticking out the side. So it's going to go from here to out here somewhere. truly enormous vehicle. But yeah, so the Gateway is a staging point. Usually there's going to be a couple astronauts on Gateway while a couple more go down to the surface. It orbits technically both the moon and Earth at the same time, because the moon is going around the Earth. It has a very elliptical orbit. And so if you look at this orbit in 3D, it kind of traces out a potato chip, like a Lay's potato chip shape, because it kicks out on the side. It's quite unusual. But that orbit allows us to access any point on the lunar surface. It allows us to maintain communication with our astronauts in the South Pole during their entire mission, because that entire orbit takes about 6.5 days. And it enables easy access and disposal out into heliocentric space, so outside of Earth. So disposing of things from the NRHO is quite easy, and it's easy to change your orbit because you only need a little bit of thrust, centimeters a second, as opposed to kilometers a second to change your orbit as it compares to Earth.
And the South Pole is because we know there's ice there?
It's a good question. So the South Pole has interesting geometry. So there's a big crater in the South Pole called Shackleton Crater. Inside that crater, we have seen evidence of water ice. And so we're actually sending a CLPS lander, Commercial Lunar Payload Services lander, to the South Pole to dig and make sure that we got water ice there. And it's constantly in shadow. So that means the water ice stays there and doesn't sublimate or get evaporated from solar wind and solar energy. At the same time, the rim of that crater is constantly in sunlight. So if you put solar panels on the rims, have water ice in the bottom, you have the foundations for a human colony. That human colony is pretty tricky, right? Because the distance between the water ice in the center of the crater and the rim of the crater is about 5 kilometers. And if you think about going outside and running 5 kilometers on Earth, a lot of people don't really like doing that. That's why we have 5Ks and their special events, right? But on the moon, that's gonna be pretty tough to run a power line on the moon that far. Never been done before. And if you think of the entire Apollo program, the longest stay we've had during the Apollo program is about 72 hours. That's not very long. And at the end of those 72 hours, our systems were falling apart. They were breaking, they were covered in dust. Any moving parts, dust gets in there, grinds it down. It covers systems, it sneaks into the habitats, into the modules, it gets in astronauts' lungs. It is a major problem. So figuring out how to live on the moon is gonna be a real challenge. And it's all problems that we have to fix before we go to Mars. Mars is even worse. That soil, when exposed to oxygen like we have in our air, becomes a chloride, poisonous. So we're gonna have to figure out a way to sort out that dust.